So good afternoon. Welcome to our workshop. This meeting is being held in person and telecast between our Fresno, Modesto, and Bakersfield offices and via Zoom. My name is Emily Nealand, Program Manager of our planning team here at the district, and I'm joined by John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science and Planning, Patrick Houlihan, Supervising Air Quality Specialist, Molly Boyette, Air Quality Specialist, and we're also joined by Austin Hicks from the California Air Resources Board, in addition to a number of CARB staff who will be assisting with the Q&A portion of this meeting. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation in person and via Zoom. Before we begin, here are some important guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. Please silence your other communication devices such as your cell phone. During the meeting, all public participants on Zoom will be placed on mute by the host. Public members will not be able to mute or unmute manually. If you'd like to provide public comment during the comment period, please step up to the podium if you're in person to signify that you wish to speak, or raise your hand on Zoom. Audio for members of the public will be unmuted once they are recognized to make a public comment. You can also submit public comments or questions via the Q&A function on Zoom and to webcast@valleyair.org. We'll be monitoring this inbox during the meeting. If you're presenting or providing a public comment, please state your name and affiliation and speak slowly to allow for smooth translation. At this time, our translators will share instructions on how to access the translation services.
Todavía están arreglando la función de interpretación en el Zoom, pero cuando les aparezca, ¿verdad? Si están usando una computadora, en los controles de la reunión o del seminario web, van a seleccionar el icono de interpretación que aparece a un mundo en la parte de baja de la pantalla. Seleccione español y silencie el audio original. Si está usando un teléfono o tableta, seleccione los 3 puntos para ver más opciones, seleccione interpretación y siga las mismas instrucciones de arriba. Si van a hacer una pregunta o dar un comentario, seleccione el icono de reacciones para levantar su mano. Gracias.
Perfect, thank you. So now just a quick intro to our workshop. The purpose of this workshop is to discuss our plan for the 2012 PM 2.5 standard. EPA established this standard in 2013 at 12 micrograms per cubic meter. We were initially designated as moderate non-attainment in 2015, and we subsequently submitted the 2016 PM 2.5 plan, which included a request for serious reclassification.
Excuse me, sorry for interrupting. Interpretation is not on. You need to start interpretation because it's not on.
Okay, one moment, please. Our IT team is looking into the issue. I'm sorry for the interruption. We will go ahead and take a quick pause until the translation is corrected. Okay, I do apologize for that. The interpretation option should now be popped up for you on your Zoom. So feel free to join if you'd like to join the Spanish interpretation channel. So I will go ahead and start over. Apologies for the interruption again. So today we're here to talk about the 2012 PM 2.5 standard plan that we're currently developing, which is for the 12 microgram per cubic meter standard. This was established in 2013, and the district was designated to moderate non-attainment in 2015. We subsequently submitted a 2016 PM 2.5 plan with a request for reclassification to serious non-attainment. EPA approved our moderate plan and reclassified the district to serious effective December 2021. And our serious plan is now due to EPA. We did originally address the serious plan requirements as part of our 2018 PM 2.5 plan earlier than required. EPA proposed full approval of this serious plan in December of 2021, but then reversed this decision and proposed disapproval in October of 2022. So in response to this, CARB withdrew the plan with district concurrence in October of 2022, and we are now developing an updated serious plan, which will build upon the strategies that were put in place in the 2018 PM 2.5 plan, and also include revisions to incorporate latest guidance, feedback, as well as public comments in order to meet Clean Air Act requirements. We did adopt initial plan elements on October 19th of 2023, which were submitted to EPA on November 17th. So just for a little bit more background, the Valley faces a number of challenges with respect to meeting air quality standards due to our unique combination of topography and meteorology, as well as the fact that we're a major goods movement corridor. We have high population growth, pollution transport from other areas, wildfires, drought, as well as other factors. So because of this, we're required to go above and beyond to meet clean air targets in comparison to other regions. PM 2.5 are particles with a diameter of 2.5 microns and smaller. You can see that size depicted here on the screen, comparing to the size of fine beach sand, as well as a hair follicle. So these are super tiny particles. They're a mixture of solid particles and liquid droplets in the air, and they're emitted directly or formed indirectly through chemical reactions between gases. So one of the district's missions is to improve health and quality of life for all Valley residents through efficient, effective, and entrepreneurial air quality management strategies. So through this, we develop air quality plans and strategies to reduce emissions using health risk reduction strategies. Our plan will demonstrate the district and CARB's ongoing efforts to improve air quality in the Valley through a comprehensive strategy. And through this public process and as part of our plan, the district and CARB will be evaluating health benefits of the plan strategy. So with that, I will pass it over to Molly Boyette.
Thanks, Emily. So the district's emission reduction strategies have a strong foundation of scientific research, and as such, the district continues to serve as administrator of the San Joaquin Valley-wide Air Pollution Study Agency, which is a cooperative research collaboration between the district, EPA, CARB, and other air districts and stakeholders that has been propelled by major research campaigns. Studies include the California Regional Particulate Air Quality Study and Central California Ozone Study. And the agency has spent approximately $60 million of private and public funds towards cutting-edge Valley-based research. These efforts have enhanced understanding of contributing factors to Valley air quality and developed technical tools to formulate equitable and effective regional emission control plans. The district and CARB are in process of implementing a number of clean air strategies included in the 2018 PM 2.5 plan and the 2022 ozone plan. And the district is also implementing community level emission and exposure reduction strategies within South Central Fresno, Shafter, Stockton, and Arvin-Lamont, which are the CARB selected communities as part of the Assembly Bill 617 program. And the district and CARB must continue to rely on sound Valley-based research and science to help guide the development and implementation of these efforts, as well as the revised plan for the 2012 standards. These strategies build on strategies already in place, as mentioned, the 2018 PM 2.5 plan, the 2022 ozone plan, and numerous plans that the district has adopted over the years. The controls adopted as part of these plans are improving air quality, as shown in the figure to the right. We have seen NOx emission reductions from stationary sources by over 90% through hundreds of regulatory actions. In addition, CARB has adopted numerous mobile source emission controls, and these combined efforts represent the nation's toughest emissions control program. Additionally, the district operates a strong incentive program with $6.2 billion in public and private investment. And through these investments, the Valley continues to make major improvements with respect to air quality. Even with these significant improvements, more reductions are needed to attain the federal standards. Shown here is a list of recent regulatory actions made under plan commitments in the recent years. You can see there's been a number of actions for a variety of sources, and rule development is ongoing for our Rule 4550 conservation management practices. Focusing back on the progress in improving the Valley air quality, specifically for PM 2.5, the charts on this slide show the days meeting versus days exceeding the PM 2.5 standard during the winter months. And as you can see, in 2002 and 2003, we were seeing about 61% of days meeting the standard. Compared to recently, we are seeing 93% of days meeting the standard. These are the elements that are required under the Clean Air Act for non-attainment areas. We've addressed a few of these, and I'll talk more in detail about those, as well as the ones we're currently developing in the next few slides. So as part of the initial SIP requirements that was submitted to EPA, the district and CARB developed a comprehensive, accurate, and current inventory of actual emissions of relevant pollutants in the Valley. Modeling and analysis demonstrated that SOx, VOC, and ammonia do not contribute significantly to PM 2.5 formation in the Valley. And the district and CARB, along with the Metropolitan Planning Organization, demonstrated that we are implementing best available control measures for the control of direct PM 2.5 and NOx no later than 2025 as required. In addition, the district adopted revisions to the Modified Stationary Source Review Rule in April 2023, fulfilling the requirements for major sources. And the SIP requirements that are currently under development include an attainment demonstration, which includes modeling that will demonstrate attainment of the standard by 2030. Also reasonable further progress, or RFP, and quantitative milestones, which will demonstrate incremental emission reductions leading to the attainment date. Contingency measures that will be implemented in the event that EPA issues final rulemaking that the Valley failed to meet a regulatory requirement, as well as the most stringent measures as required for serious non-attainment areas requesting an attainment date extension. A little more detail on those requirements, starting with RFP and quantitative milestones. RFP must demonstrate annual incremental reductions in emissions of PM 2.5 and precursors to ensure attainment of the standard as expeditiously as practicable. And quantitative milestones are to be achieved every 3 years until the area is redesignated attainment, and which demonstrate reasonable further progress toward attainment by the applicable date. So the district and CARB are developing an analysis demonstrating linear progress in PM 2.5 and NOx emission reductions through 2031. Quantitative milestone years consist of 2019, 2022, 2025, 2028, 2030, and 2031. The analysis will present the schedule of control measures and estimated emission reductions to be achieved by each milestone year. Contingency measures must provide for implementation of specific measures if an area fails to attain or meet a milestone for RFP or attainment. These are a historically tricky requirement to meet. EPA has published draft guidance in March of 2023 that identified solutions and flexibility related to scarcity of measures, implementation timelines following a contingency trigger, and the amount of reductions needed. The district and CARB recently addressed contingency measures for the 97, 2006, and 2012 PM 2.5 standards based on the draft guidance, which EPA proposed approval of December 20th, 2023. This plan is to include contingency measures based on a feasibility analysis that include Rule 4901, which is our residential wood burning rule, Rule 8051, open areas, and CARB's statewide smog check contingency measure. The attainment demonstration will demonstrate that the specific annual emissions reductions included in the plan are sufficient to attain the standard by the date applicable to the area. So the district and CARB are conducting extensive modeling analysis consistent with EPA guidance to estimate future PM2.5 design values. Initial modeling demonstrates that even with implementation of the best available control measures, attainment by 2025 is impracticable. The district and CARB are developing a control strategy in order to achieve emission reductions that will provide for attainment as expeditiously as practicable, but no later than 2030. And the final modeling results and attainment strategy will be provided at future workshops. In determining the attainment strategy, the district and CARB conduct a robust control measure analysis. We will be building on the BACM analysis that was included in the initial SIP requirement. And that analysis showed that the best available control measures continue to be implemented in the Valley for NOx and PM2.5 by 2025 as required. Because of the attainment date extension, we are also required to implement the most stringent measures no later than 1 year prior to the attainment date, which will be 2029. And the district and CARB are evaluating all additional control measure opportunities going beyond the best available control measures. Now I will pass it along to Patrick to go into a little more detail on each control measure we're looking at.
Thank you, Molly. Okay, so the next 3 slides are a list of rules that we've evaluated for the potential to get further emission reductions. The rules with the green check next to them are rules we have identified for continuing analysis. As you can see, we've done extensive evaluation on every rule that not only limits direct particulate matter, but also rules that limit precursors to particulate matter, such as NOx. Quite a few of these rules deal with combustion. And the third of these slides deals with our Reg 8 suite of rules. These are the 8000 series regulations. These rules deal with vehicle travel on unpaved roads, movement of bulk materials, construction activity, etc. So these are where some of the direct PM emissions would come from. The continuing analysis will focus on the technological and economic feasibility of these identified potential measures to achieve additional emission reductions. Conservation management practices. This is our Rule 4550. This rule is applicable to on-field farming and agricultural operational sites. This rule reduces PM10 emissions by 35 tons per day. And because PM2.5 is a component of PM10, it has reduced PM2.5 as well. Those reductions were achieved or are achieved through reduced passes of agricultural equipment and other conservation practices. The focus will be on reducing emissions from the fallowing of agricultural land. Meaningful engagement will be necessary with stakeholders, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and other agencies as well. Stationary gas turbines is our Rule 4703. This limits NOx from turbines that are located in places such as oil and gas fields, manufacturing locations, public and investor-owned utilities, and government locations as well, such as prisons. The latest amendment achieves a reduction of 2.2 tons per day of NOx, and the focus will be on reducing NOx emissions still further from these sources. Wood-burning fireplaces and wood-burning heaters are Rule 4901. This rule limits direct particulate matter amongst other emissions. The 2019 amendments were brought about as commitments from the 2018 PM 2.5 plan, and those include rulemaking to lower wood burning curtailment levels, enhancements to the district's incentive grant funding levels, public outreach and education, more enforcement, and updated air quality forecasting programs. The focus will be on further reduction of burning either through a regulatory or incentive-based strategy. And in building electrification is our rules 4308, 4902, and 4905. These rules limit NOx emissions from furnaces, water heaters, and small boilers that can be found at residential and in commercial sectors. They have been amended and updated many times throughout the past few decades. The focus will be to evaluate the potential to go to zero NOx through the use of heat pump space heaters, heat pump water heaters, as well as electric resistance in some cases. Want to point out also too, the district is closely tracking other state and local agencies' efforts in this realm. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Austin Hicks with CARB, and then Austin, when you're done, we'll go back to Molly. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Austin Hicks with the California Air Resources Board, and today I plan to provide you an overview regarding CARB's potential control strategy and air quality modeling for the annual PM 2.5 standard in the San Joaquin Valley. For this slide, on September 22nd, 2023, CARB board approved the state measures commitment in the 2022 state SIP strategy. The strategy was developed to support the 2022 San Joaquin Valley Ozone Plan through a robust public process and identifies the level of action needed to meet air quality standards and protect public health, with the focus at the time on attainment of the 70 parts per billion 8-hour ozone standard. This strategy drives the pace and scale of CARB's rulemaking to the end of this decade. CARB will utilize the 2022 state SIP strategy measures planned for implementation by 2030 in order to support commitments towards attainment of the annual PM 2.5 standard. Next slide, please. For this slide, the figure identifies the list of measures that CARB will pursue for the PM 2.5 annual standard in the San Joaquin Valley. Some of these have already been adopted, such as advanced clean fleets, in-use locomotive, amendments to in-use diesel-fueled fleets, commercial hovercraft amendments, and clean mile standard regulations. Two of these regulations that were adopted last year for trucks and locomotives are monumental programs that reduce emissions significantly across the San Joaquin Valley and all of California. The ACF regulation focuses on strategies to ensure that the cleanest vehicles are deployed by government, businesses, and other entities in California to meet their transportation needs, while the in-use locomotive regulation uses mechanisms available under CARB's regulatory authority to accelerate the adoption of advanced cleaner technology and includes zero-emission technology for locomotive operations. Many other measures are in the middle of the regulatory process, including zero-emission standards for space and water heaters. CARB will also be pursuing a suite of off-road measures, including new Tier 5 off-road standard, zero-emission requirements for certain manufacturers, and sources that operate in the ports, including cargo handling equipment. And CARB is continuing to target further emission reductions from on-road heavy-duty vehicles, namely those that are not subject to our advanced clean fleets programs with the zero emissions truck measure. Next slide, please. The following is a list of measures mentioned in the previous slide that are needed, to demonstrate attainment in the San Joaquin Valley by the 2030 attainment year and their currently planned schedules. As you can see, some of these measures have already been adopted as regulations, which are represented by the purple stars, and many more are being developed and are set for adoption in the near term, which are the gold stars. The next two slides will split these measures by recently adopted and remaining to be adopted measures. Next slide, please. This suite of measure represents the state's recently adopted 2016 and 2022 States of Strategy measures and the potential commitment of emission reductions for the San Joaquin Valley to support attainment of the standard in 2030. CARB and the district are coordinating on how to incorporate these recently adopted CARB regulations into the baseline. Next slide, please. This suite of measure represents the state's remaining 2016 and 2022 States of Strategy measure commitments still to be developed and adopted as regulations by the CARB board to support attainment of the standard in 2030. Next slide, please. In addition to the recently adopted and remaining 2016 and 2022 States of Strategy commitments, CARB is still working with the district to finalize our commitments to demonstrate attainment for the standard in 2030. There are some potentially new CARB measures being considered, such as evaluating the 11 tons per day of NOx emission reductions from incentivized agricultural equipment in 2024 and quantifying those reductions towards 2030. CARB is also looking at possible targeted incentives in Kern County, and beyond that, CARB would like to hear from the public on any new suggestions that they may have. Next slide, please. Now we'll turn to air quality modeling status. Air quality modeling is a mathematical representation of different atmospheric processes that impact air quality. Those processes include meteorology, emissions, air pollution transported from outside of California, and chemistry. We have completed the baseline 2017 modeling, and model performance is within USPA's recommended performance metrics. A comparison of observed and modeled 24-hour average PM 2.5 levels at Fresno is shown in the upper right plot, where modeled values are shown in blue and observations are shown as red dots. The model is able to predict the daily and seasonal variations of PM 2.5, including wintertime peak PM 2.5 concentrations. The bottom plot represents the model performance for different PM 2.5 chemical components at the 4 PM 2.5 speciation sites in the San Joaquin Valley. The brown line represents the model performance criteria recommended by US EPA, and our modeling is within US EPA recommended range. Next slide, please. And finally, the next modeling steps will be to focus on modeling for the 2030 future year. We are in the process of assessing the air quality impacts from CARB's States of Strategy and other commitments, as well as the district's commitments. We'll be working with the district to develop and assess potential attainment strategies to demonstrate future attainment of the annual PM 2.5 standard. This concludes our presentation. We'll now turn it back to San Joaquin Valley staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Austin. The attainment of federal standards will require significant reductions in emissions from mobile sources, primarily under state and federal jurisdiction. It is imperative that emissions are reduced from mobile sources that fall exclusively under federal jurisdiction, including interstate heavy-duty trucks, locomotives, and other mobile sources. The district continues to advocate for state and federal action, as well as pursue additional funding opportunities in order to achieve emission reductions from mobile sources. Looking at the next steps for the plan, after today's workshop, taking into consideration any feedback on potential control measures, the district and CARB will continue to develop the plan addressing the remaining requirements through a public process with additional workshops, updates to Citizens Advisory Committee, Environmental Justice Advisory Group, and the governing board. The district will continue to work with CARB to evaluate additional emission reduction opportunities within our respective jurisdictions, and the proposed plan will be taken to the governing board for consideration in the second quarter of 2024. Comments and questions are welcome throughout the entire process, and you can contact myself, Molly Boyette, with the contact information on this slide to sign up for updates about the plan development process and any future workshops. Use the link at the bottom right to sign up for the district's PM plans listserv. And with that, that concludes our slides. We will have time now for public comments and questions.
Do we have any public commenters in the Bakersfield office?
Yes, we do. Just 1 minute.
Okay, thank you, Marlene. Thank you. Please state your name and affiliation.
Hi, Doug Schaefer, California Resources Corporation. Mr. Houlihan, it's good to see you again. So your next step slide, bullet point 1, today's workshop is to present and discuss and receive feedback on potential control measures. So was the slide show a preamble? What control measures would you like to talk about?
So the slides on the specific sources that were included were some specific opportunities that we may be pursuing. So receiving public feedback on those, as well as any other potential opportunities that the public would like us to look closer into.
Okay. So I think you guys have kind of stated it in the summary that EPA is requesting a PM 2.5 standard that previous district modeling has demonstrated is unattainable just because of our biogenic PM 2.5, naturally occurring PM 2.5. So my question is, does the revised EPA model account for that? And does the revised EPA standard account for our baseline that we cannot get below? Thank you.
Just to respond to that, this is John Klassen with the Air District. If you're responding to the new standard that just came out last week, the 9 microgram standard, yes, we are looking at that closely at the new standard that just came out. There are a lot of questions about background levels of PM 2.5, background levels of emissions, a lot of questions surrounding that. So that'll be a part of the analysis and ongoing work as we work towards that standard and put that plan together. But as highlighted in today's presentation, this is focused on that 12 microgram standard, not the latest standard of 9 micrograms.
Thank you for your comment. I see we have another person at the podium. Please share your name and affiliation as well as your comment.
My name is John Sanders. I abandon oil wells for a living. I work for MMI Services. I feel it's proper to advise all the members, people who are in this meeting about CARB's mission, which is to promote and protect public health, welfare, and ecological resources through effective reduction of air pollutants while recognizing and considering effects on the economy. CARB is a lead agency for climate change programs and oversees all air pollution control efforts in California to attain and maintain health-based air quality standards. Well, what we're forgetting is the economy, and in order to get to the point where to reduce more air particles, we need to abandon wells. So I have a semi-prepared speech, and then if you guys have questions, I'm available to answer. I ask that you consider the following when making these rules, or more strict, or the enforcement of them. Electric vehicles, light duty and heavy duty, are not sufficient tools to abandon wells. Companies that perform abandonments should have an exemption priority. Number 2, we have 280 of our employees who abandon wells live in the underserved areas of Kern County. If we are forced to close down because of equipment not designed for these employees to perform this work, the underserved communities will become broke more broke per se, and not paying taxes. Third, the topography and meteorology of Kern County, it is here. And I believe Doug said, you know, what is this baseline of, you know, we can't control some things. And a lot of the equipment, the heavy duty equipment that comes through here is from out of state. It is, they're bringing it in, and a lot of people just register their equipment out of state, and people will still do this. We need to find something in between where we are going and where we are now. As of 2022, we've had a 93% reduction in stationary source emissions, according to the wall that I'm standing in front of. That's pretty impressive. And I know we have a lot, we could do more, and I think we should do more. And I look forward to doing more. But there's some unreasonable timelines being placed out here, and the small guys are going to go away. The bigger guys are going to hang out for a while till they get enough to go away. And then California is going to have its own new problems. I don't know. And then this is a question / statement. So the oil fields that we work in, they're not on the highway. They're off the beaten path. They're in the mountains. It's hard work to go do what we do. I'm not following the enforcement model that comes down on the people who are trying to make Kern County a better place with respect to air quality. We are actually trying to do that. I've abandoned 3 of my own wells because there's nothing happening in them, and all they do is leak gas. And when I became aware of those 3 wells, we closed them in. To close, I ask again, I've asked this in many different venues, please consider what you're doing. This is, I just read this PowerPoint. It's just, okay, well, we tried, so now we're going to try again. You can't put a square peg in a round hole. We have to do this better. I challenge you guys, challenge everyone. I'm doing my part, I can tell you that, but I challenge everyone on the Valley Air Pollution Control District, at CARB, quit messing with some of this stuff. Tier 4F motors are really clean. They're so clean, they're barely doing the job out on a job site because of regeneration. They're just not as good as they used to be, but we accept that and work around it. So with that, if you have any questions for me, I'm available. Otherwise, thank you for your time, and thank you for being, for taking care of California. I just think we're moving too fast, and we don't have an infrastructure for a lot of the stuff that we're trying to do. So thank you.
Thank you, John, for those comments. Do we have any additional public commenters in the Bakersfield office?
No more public comment in Bakersfield.
Do we have any public commenters in the Modesto office?
No public comment in Modesto.
Thank you. Do we have any public commenters in the central office? Seeing none. And now we'll move to Zoom. Do we have any public commenters on Zoom?
We have a few public commenters. I have Lisa Flores.
Okay, Lisa, you will be prompted to unmute.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. First, I want to tell you guys your public outreach totally sucked today. You do not send out announcements on your letterhead that say 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and actually start at 4. I'm just wondering how many people from Bakersfield attempted to get on and just never made it because they weren't going to hang out for an hour. especially since I signed up at 2:45 today and they did not update me with the new hour, with the new time at 4 o'clock until almost 3:30. I've always talked about competency within the air district. This is just another example. Now, on to PM 2.5. Here are what my issues are. I wrote them all down. The air district continues to fail communities from air pollution, especially those communities of color and low-income communities. For example, Bakersfield oil fields, the oil fields in Bakersfield should no longer do any sort of self-certification, and you actually need staff going out there to see what's leaking, what is not working, and what needs to be corrected. Your planning process, your review process needs to stop promoting environmental, needs to start promoting environmental justice versus promoting environmental racism. For example, Roding Park and Chaffee Zoo, my beloved Roding Park, will have a greater exposure to PM 2.5 as Caltrans upgrades and expands the 99 between Olive and Belmont. Furthermore, the homeless and the low income along that corridor on Parkway Drive along the 99, the Air District failed that community. They failed to force the city of Fresno to construct walls and build vegetation barriers. You have some of the community's poorest folks there who don't have a great health record, and now they're exposed to high numbers of PM 2.5. How do I know this? My beloved dog park was right next to the 99, right there on Olive, and the city of Fresno spent $750,000, more or less, to move the dog park further into Roding Park because the PM 2.5 levels were so high. Our little dogs, we were starting to notice, they were dying like 3 to 4 years earlier than expected. Then, of course, you have Southwest Fresno and the triangle out there. Why does the Air District not support historic communities of color? 20 years. If you lived within that area in the Southwest, the AB 617 community, you would have your life cut by 20 years. And what does this Air District do? They rubber stamp development. Why? Why? Basically, the Air District has always had a professional reputation of rubber stamping. Now it is time to actually develop and get into environmental justice game, because the duplicity of rubber stamping, the duplicity of not doing anything, the duplicity of not challenging and not making sure vegetative barriers happen, self-certifications are gone, is basically increasing death numbers around low income and communities of color. That's why you need to get more aggressive about handling the PM 2.5. And we need to start talking about the 99. No one wants to mention the ugliness of the 99. And I think it's probably time that we do. Thank you for your time. And you guys have a good evening.
Thank you, Lisa. We appreciate your comments. And again, I'd just like to apologize for the discrepancy with the workshop notice. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we do include setup time in our meeting invite to internal staff, and there was an issue. We accidentally included that prep time. So appreciate those comments. Thank you. Who's our next public commenter on Zoom?
Janet Beetskame.
Hi, Janet. You should be prompted to unmute on your screen.
Thank you. I'm addressing the effects of PM 2.5. I became sick about 3 years after moving to Fresno in 2003. I ended up in the ER sick from asthma. I didn't even know I had asthma. When I'm exposed to PM 2.5, I get a sinus infection that develops into a bronchitis infection that can develop into pneumonia. I have to stay out of the air or use an N95 mask. And actually, all San Joaquin Valley residents are adversely affected by high levels of PM 2.5. All of us. But those of us who have respiratory diseases, we're the canaries in the mine. We're the ones who register what the levels of PM 2.5 can do to people. Winter months are especially bad. We live in a bowl. And when the winter inversion happens, the PM 2.5 comes down to where we're breathing. And so it's concentrated. Most of the winter months are unhealthy, with the exception of rainy periods. Now, November and December, we didn't have much rain, and I have the RON notifications coming to my phone, and I had a lot of notifications in November and December. We started getting rain, and I have had a few days where I could go out, walk my dog, garden, enjoy being outside. But sadly, after the rains, we're back to where the levels of PM 2.5 are dangerous for me. Now, I refer to myself because I know what happens to me. But there are thousands of us that live in this valley who are adversely affected by the PM 2.5 levels. And some of these people don't know anything about what is affecting them. They're unaware. They don't know. All they know is they keep getting sick. We are in a very bad situation. Yes, it does affect the economy, bringing our PM 2.5 levels down. But we also have to think about people's lives. And we have to think about children who are adversely affected by unhealthy air. It affects them differently than it affects adults. It affects their growth process. Having asthma or respiratory disease is very expensive. But you know, those calculations are never included. The medical and medications and ER visits and doctor visits and filters that you have to get, MERV 14 filters for HVAC systems, filters for air purifiers, all of the expenses that are associated with having respiratory diseases and asthma, they're never calculated in any of the discussions. But they exist, and some people can't even afford them. Our previous speaker referred to these people who are exposed. PM 2.5 should be in the good range. The good range is less than 12 micrograms per cubic meter. That's the good range. That's when I can go out. So I have a suggestion that I have suggested for years. Ban burning. Ban residential burning. The majority of us don't need to burn anything for heat. And those who are using their outdoor fireplaces and outdoor fire pits, that is not helpful either for keeping our air at a safe level of breathing. So my point We are all affected by elevated PM 2.5, every single one of us. And there are some of us who register it by becoming ill, becoming very ill. I've been in the ER, very ill from PM 2.5. And there are costs associated with having asthma and other respiratory diseases and the other diseases that affect us. The diseases because these particles get into our blood system. They're small enough to transfer into our blood and into our organs. And we also have to calculate how much money is spent on protecting ourselves from the unhealthy air and curing us from the diseases that the unhealthy air is causing us. I understand that there are economies that will be affected. I also understand that the population here is growing. We have the original agricultural businesses, and now we have people moving here that are growing our population. I thank you for the time to speak. I am 100% behind getting these done so that our PM 2.5 is down to where it is safe to breathe, safe for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet, for your comments. Just wanted to provide a couple of responses to some points that you raised. First, with regards to health impacts, as part of this plan, we will be evaluating health impacts, both monetary as well as count of hospital visits, asthma attacks, different health impacts along those lines. And then included in the presentation, we are considering potential amendments to our residential wood burning rule as well. A couple of different approaches. So if anyone has any particular thoughts on that, we would be more than happy to hear your comments. So thank you, Janet, for your thoughts. Who is our next speaker on Zoom?
Laura Hayter.
Hi, Laura. You should be prompted to unmute.
I think lumbering has contributed to more severe and intense fires and also trash burning is a big problem. I think it's better just to bury it. And also I still don't know exactly. I think I missed some of the presentation. How much does oil well drilling contribute to PM 2.5? And also how much does the whole oil industry as a whole contribute to PM 2.5 in Central Valley, including the chemicals they use and the trucks on the road, the oil trucks on the road?
Hi, Laura. We're having just a little bit of trouble hearing you. I did hear your question with regards to oil emissions. From my recollection, there's very little PM 2.5 emissions associated with oil production in general, but I can definitely circle back on that and see if I can find a more exact number for you. I apologize, I don't have that right in front of me.
Also, do you think that lumbering causes more intense and severe forest fires? Because, because there's more wind blowing through the forest when they're not densely packed, and there's smaller shrub bushes and trees are more there's also more death of trees because they're holding less water in that area, that region. There's more heating and everything from the sunlight and drying out trees, and then also they don't break the wind as much when they're missing when the lumberers took the trees. they don't have like the soil loses carbon. It doesn't have enough carbon to really hold water.
Hey, Laura, this is John Klassen. To speak to your comments about forest fire impacts on PM 2.5, yes, that is definitely very true. Forest fires emissions can easily overwhelm all the normal emissions we see here in the San Joaquin Valley from transportation and industrial sources. That is a concern of ours, and it can heavily impact our air quality. So that's something that we have to consider as we plan for this and for the new standard that just came out. There are a lot of policies surrounding that on the approach for that, but that is a really good question and a key part of the work that we have to do.
Well, like the older trees are more resistant to fires because they're taller off the ground and
Yes, that's a great point. Thanks, Laura, for your comments. And if you have any other comments for us, please reach out. Appreciate it.
Okay, who is our next commenter on Zoom?
Jed Holtzman.
Hello, Jed. You should be prompted to unmute.
Thank you very much, staff, and good evening. My name is Jed Holtzman with RMI. Thanks so much for the presentation tonight. Just wanted to hone in a little bit on the building measures talked about. According to the EPA, fossil fuel appliances like the water heaters and furnaces that you put up the slides about emit more PM 2.5 directly and more than 5 times the NOx than is emitted by all power plants in the region, which I find to be quite shocking. Ultimately, these building emissions are very significant and contribute to the Air District's ongoing failure to attain federal and state air quality standards, and according to the EPA's COBRA model, also drive health impacts of approximately $247 million each and every year. If we think about what $247 million could buy in terms of air quality, especially given your profession, I'm sure you have a great sense of the impact of those funds. The Air District has reported that it considers CARB's upcoming zero emission appliance rules to be MSM, I believe, in the previous workshop. And just wanted to highlight that not only the Bay Area Air Quality Management District zero emission rules operating on earlier timelines of 2027 for residential water heaters, 2029 for furnaces, and 2031 for commercial and multifamily water heaters and boilers. But since we last met about this plan publicly, the South Coast AQMD has further developed its own zero emission appliance rules. And relevantly for South Coast's own non-attainment status, which parallels the Valley Air District status, South Coast is proposing to use earlier timelines for their zero emission compliance than CARB is likely to propose because of the very serious pollution burden in that air district and the fundamental responsibility to reduce that pollution as much as possible, as quickly as possible. And I would posit that the Valley Air District has both the same problem and the same responsibility. So hope you are following the South Coast rules 1146.2 and 1111 and 1121 as those are coming along, because I think that I know from speaking with you all that you all do not necessarily think that the Bay Area's policy is necessarily directly compatible with the Valley, given its different socioeconomic status and demographics and such. But I do think that the South Coast AQMD, both in attainment status and those characteristics, is much more similar and bears more examination. Second, I think the Air District should seriously consider taking even faster action on a subset of the appliance sector to achieve the near-term reductions the region desperately needs. and would throw out that a requirement for zero emission furnaces and water heaters for new construction and major rehabilitations, which more or less qualify as new construction, is both technically and socioeconomically feasible now and should be pursued for the near-term reductions that you need to bank and convey to EPA. The Air District could also consider a cross-cutting zero-emission sales target that begins next year. For example, 20% zero-emission sales in 2025 that essentially ramps up over time to meet CARB's likely proposal as a means of achieving both near-term and ongoing emissions reductions for the Valley, while providing manufacturers greater flexibility and aligning with CARB standards already under development. And I might add, helping to augment the market signal that CARB's policy is already having in the market. Lastly, mentioned this in the rulemaking workshop the other day, but wanted to bring into the record that the South Coast AQMD is developing a clean air appliance replacement program, which is currently called CARP, although they may look for a better acronym than that, which is essentially using their alternative compliance fees that they've banked up from furnace manufacturers to help increase heat pump deployment in the communities most heavily impacted by air pollution, both single family and multifamily. And I would strongly encourage the Air District to assess and audit the available compliance fees and penalty fees that you might have saved up and how those might be productively invested in reducing emissions in the Valley and increasing health outcomes in the Valley through helping to get clean air appliances in folks' homes and businesses. Closing out with a question, and thank you for all of the time. Looking at slide 27, the final sentence indicates that you all, I assume in partnership with your CARB partners, are conducting a further study of zero NOx requirements for building appliances, taking into consideration, et cetera, and just interested in any more detail that you all could provide publicly about, I guess, the nature or scope of that study, and importantly, the potential outcomes that might come out of it in terms of what might be on the table for accelerating action above and beyond what CARB is already planning for likely 2030. Thanks a lot again.
Thank you, Jed. Really appreciate those great comments and a lot of specific details, so we greatly appreciate that. A couple things I wanted to respond with, specifically with regards to South Coast process that they're currently undergoing. I know you specifically asked and suggested that we closely track that process. Just wanted to mention that we've attended all of the workshops. We've also had a number of calls with South Coast staff to discuss costs as well as implementation barriers that we've seen, comparing to any barriers that they've seen as well, and seeing how those things may be able to be overcome. With regards to the appliance replacement program, thank you again for providing that comment. I know you provided that comment at the workshop on Tuesday. Just wanted to mention that is something that I brought back and have been discussing internally, so we're looking at potential options for that as well. And then with regards to our further study, we have done a lot of analysis with regards to costs, specifically also talking with South Coast, tracking South Coast and Bay Area, comparing costs with South Coast, talking about differences that we've been seeing and how that can be compared. So that's the main efforts that we've currently been undergoing. But greatly appreciate your comments. If you have any additional information you'd like to provide to us to help with our analysis, that would be fantastic. So thank you, Jed. Appreciate your comments. And who is our next commenter?
Ned Leba.
Hello, Ned. You should be prompted to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
You can, okay. Well, thank you for the presentation. I had sent some emails for clarification, and I guess I didn't get a response. It's pretty clear, I guess we're not going to be talking, I thought we were going to be talking about the new proposed 9 microgram per meter cubed standard, but that's not there. I did send you again an email asking if there had been an update on the health assessments. I gave you the SIP Health Impacts Chapter 3, so I hope that at some point maybe that's going to be made available. I also observed that I had talked to John DeMassa because Molly did exclaim the $60 million that's being used for all kinds of studies. John said, can't use a dime for health studies. And I think we really do need an update on the health studies. Look, you also need to show what the cost per metric ton of abatement, all these different proposals are. We really have PM 2.5 and NOx. So when I'm at some of these meetings, I've asked that question. They just don't display the cost of abatement per metric ton. If you want to reduce emissions, exposure, and health effects, you do it at the lowest possible cost because you can do more. And the absence of displaying, debating, showing the different costs of these measures is a great disservice. So I'll leave you with this. I mean, a couple of meetings back with the CAC, which I belong to as an environmental representative, there was a proposal where we spent $20 million for EV buses. The cost to abate the criterion pollutants were over $1.2 million per metric ton. I mean, that's outrageous. We should be, I mean, come on, folks, you need to display that stuff and think about the best ways to reduce, potentially toxic or at least emissions that could have a health impact. And you need to really demonstrate the health impacts as you go from these fairly low levels historically of PM 2.5, especially the anthropogenic elements. Finally, where the monitoring that I observe in San Joaquin County for PM 2.5 shows that we have satisfied the 12 microgram standard, and most of the valley does. There's just a few outliers that do not. These are stochastic processes here. Once in a while, you're going to go above it, but my gosh, I think unless your instruments are lying or I'm looking at the wrong ones, there's only a place or two where you're exceeding the 12 microgram, limit, and only in a few cases. An honest, dare I say, maybe I shouldn't say honest, but perhaps I would say a more comprehensive measure than the 97%, or 93% good quality of air during the winter months, which of course is the months with the most problems with PM 2.5. That's on page 12. If you put up the total frequency of all observations and see how many fail, I think that number is not going to be 93%. I think it's going to be 99%. So hopefully you'll take to heart a few of my observations and especially quantify the cost for alternatives so that we can reach whatever rational standard we must reach. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ned. I apologize we weren't able to respond to your comments that you sent earlier this afternoon, but appreciate you bringing those up here. Specifically, yes, this workshop, the purpose of it was to discuss our attainment plan for the 2012 PM 2.5 standard. So it was not focused on the new PM 2.5 standard that was just released, but we did discuss that at our governing board earlier this morning. With regards to the health impacts chapter from the 2018 PM 2.5 plan that you asked if we would be doing something similar for this plan, we will be preparing a similar chapter. And we hope to post some draft chapters within the coming months for public review prior to the proposed plan being published. As we talked about in the presentation, we'll also be conducting a health benefit analysis as part of the plan. With regards to cost per ton of reductions, that is something that we analyze as part of each individual rule development effort. It does slightly depend on what exactly the sources that you're controlling. So we do conduct that as part of our rule development processes. So we will be including those if we have rule commitments, that will be a part of the process. And then I will pass it over to John to address the remaining questions that you had.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, this is John Klassen, and just to comment on your good points about San Joaquin County air quality compared to other parts of the valley. yes, definitely the concentrations up in San Joaquin County, the northern part of the valley, are lower than what we see in the central and southern parts of the valley. But as you know, the entire valley is what's considered a non-attainment area for this 12 microgram standard. And so all areas of the valley must be below 12 in order for the entire non-attainment area of the valley to be considered attainment, which is what this plan is focused on, getting all the areas of the valley at or below 12 micrograms. So because of that, even if there are areas like up north in Stockton that are already there, we still need to make progress in reducing emissions across the valley to get everybody to that point.
Okay, thank you, Ned, for those comments. Who is our next commenter?
Perry Ellerts.
Hello, Perry. You should be prompted to unmute.
Thank you. Perry Ellerts with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. And I have a quick question followed by a short comment. My question is, can you all remind me when the deadline to submit the 2012 SIP plan is? It was December of last year, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, well, that is unfortunate and disappointing that this plan is late and we're not further along in this process. And especially concerning that an even stricter PM 2.5 standard came out by EPA that we're going to have to try to meet. So I encourage the Valley Air District and CARB to work closely with community to try to develop a clear and strong path forward to how they're not only going to meet the 2012 SIP, but also the stricter 2024 SIP. Leadership Council residents and other orgs have suggested a number of control emission reduction measures for consideration that we hope the Air District again will take into consideration. Those being that the Air District should improve its indirect warehouse rule. South Coast has a much stronger indirect source rule that we believe that the Valley Air District should improve their rule. We also asked the Air District to look at control emissions for ag equipment, pesticides, and that the Air District improve its animal confinement rule. And the last point I will make is that we disagree with the Valley's ammonia precursor analysis. We and others have submitted comments suggesting that ammonia is a precursor to PM 2.5. And in regards to ammonia, it has been historically underregulated and could be some of the easiest and cheapest opportunities for emission reductions, which could result in a large health benefits to the valley. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Perry. Appreciate those comments, and I've noted them down. Who is our next commenter?
Genevieve Salim.
Hi, Genevieve. You should be prompted to unmute.
Hello. Yes, this is Genevieve with the Central California Environmental Justice Network. It's really saddening to see that we're not going to meet the standard and that the goal is now being shifted 5 years after the fact. When back in 2018, we saw, CARB's aggregate commitments and weak rules come forward and warned, we're not going to meet the standard. We need to do more. And we were ignored, and here we are today. So I really hope this time around that the district and CARB and EPA will listen to the public about what more needs to be done. And also, look at the past plan that was recently denied by the EPA and why it was, so that we can correct these wrongs. I'd like to agree with Perry. We need a stronger indirect source rule, ISR rule. The South Coast has a more stringent one. It won its lawsuit. It is now part of the SIP. There are no more hurdles to pass here. It is officially the most stringent measure on the books. And so we are required, legally mandated to have the most stringent measures. And so I asked the district open up a rulemaking for a new ISR rule immediately, and so that it can be workshopped and we can find what the best path forward is. And obviously to meet this standard, but with the goal of meeting our new standard, which public health data shows is what's needed to protect public health. So that's one is ISR rule. Again, I agree with Perry. The EPA had said that ammonia must be regulated as a precursor, and we need to be looking at modeling of ammonia reductions up to 70%, and that we need to analyze what ammonia control measures could be. To date, I haven't seen the modeling up to 70%, and I haven't seen an analysis of what those ammonia measures could be. So we already know that the EPA doesn't agree with this. So we need to do our homework here. Lastly, I will add, we know agricultural tractors are a huge source of NOx in the San Joaquin Valley. They also remain one of the only mobile sources in the state not regulated by the California Air Resources Board. We have a strictly incentive-based approach, which is unfair to truckers and is unfair to locomotives. It's unfair to people who own passenger vehicles. We smog check our vehicles. Tractors need to be subject to a rule like all other equipment. The decades of incentives needs to come to an end, and we need to pair those incentives with a regulation. Lastly, I think we really need to engage in a strong public process and bring a lot of these issues we're discussing today into the light. If you're working on modeling right now, let's have a modeling workshop and talk about what are the assumptions that are going into it? What are our goals? What tonnage of emission reductions do we need to meet our standards? So we need to have more workshops. We need to have more public engagement. I do appreciate today that this workshop is accessible by Zoom in multiple locations, has Spanish interpretation. I do really appreciate all of those things and applaud the district, because 5 years ago that may have not been the case. But in the future, I'd also suggest these meetings moving until like 5:30 p.m. so people who are working can make it. I could go on, but I will stop there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Genevieve. Really quickly, just wanted to address one of your questions with regards to our precursor demonstration. Just wanted to mention that that is available online, including a discussion of ammonia. And it is on our PM 2.5 plan webpage under the initial elements that were adopted by the board in October of 2023. But if you have any trouble accessing that, feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to send you a copy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who is
And
our next commenter?
has a backup for ammonia measures been created? Have you looked at possible measures to reduce ammonia?
We did evaluate possible measures as part of that precursor demonstration document that was published. BACM is only required for significant precursors. So because we found ammonia to be insignificant, our BACM analysis is only for PM 2.5 and NOx sources. But again, if you have any trouble accessing those documents or if you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. And Molly's contact information is within the presentation as well.
Thank you. And for clarification, the insignificance was drawn at a 30% reduction and not above.
I know we have CARB staff on the line. They did conduct that analysis. I'm not sure, Sylvia or perhaps Jeremy, if anybody would like to speak to that.
Yeah, this is Sylvia. I can just quickly talk about it. And so the analysis did look at 30%. I'm trying to remember, Jeremy, you can chime in. We also had 70% in there. There was also, the district did a control analysis and looked at different ammonia controls. It was very exhaustive. I can't remember exactly how many were on the list. They did identify some controls, and what we determined that those controls would not even get as close to 30%. And so we determined that then the 30% was appropriate. EPA had asked us in order to support the 30% to do a control analysis. So we did do that.
Okay, thank you. That goes to the point on public process. A workshop on this rather than just a document released on the internet would be really, really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Genevieve. We did hold a number of workshops last year, which included a discussion of the precursor demonstration, and those are posted online, recordings of those. So if you have any further questions, again, feel free to reach out. It looks like our next commenter is Mark Rose. You will be prompted to unmute.
Hello, Mark Rose with National Parks Conservation Association. Thank you for this opportunity to comment. I would like to say that I'm surprised by today's announcement that we won't be meeting this standard by the 2025 attainment deadline. But, you know, going back in history and seeing how many deadlines we've missed and just remembering, you know, testifying in front of both the Air District and CARB back before the 2018 plan and pointing out the significant deficiencies with that plan between the aggregate commitments and other areas that we thought could have been strengthened. I think it's obvious that we're going to be in this exact same situation here in February of 2024, several months after this plan was initially due, and less than 2 years before the, you know, attainment deadline under the Clean Air Act. You know, before I get to a list of control measures that I would like to see, you know, included in this rulemaking process, I do have just a question about, you know, where we are in terms of following the Clean Air Act. I know the district and CARB requested a 5-year extension for the 2006 24-hour standard and was granted by EPA. Under the Clean Air Act, it's very clear that you're only allowed to get one single 5-year extension on a standard. But here you are pushing the deadline back to 2030, and it's unclear under what authority you have to do that. So I guess my question is, you know, under what authority under the Clean Air Act are you allowed to push the deadline back by another 5 years? I would also ask, does that mean are you going to be under a 5-year or 5% annual reduction plan? And then lastly, my third question related to that is, if you are not going to meet the 2025 standard, which is clearly laid out under the Clean Air Act that you're required to meet that standard, are you then going to be implementing contingency measures starting in 2025? So I'll ask those questions real quick, and then I'll get into some of the control measures that I'd like to see included in the plan.
Hey, Mark, just to respond to some of the years and the timeline questions that you have, this is John Klassen. At the year 2025, that was the serious deadline for this 12 microgram standard. So with what we're proposing here is 2030 would be that first 5-year extension beyond that serious deadline in 2025. So that's what's being considered in this plan.
But you're only allowed to be granted one single 5-year extension under the Clean Air Act, and you already used that extension for the 2006 plan.
Yeah, that's a good point. The timelines that you have and the options for being moderate, serious, and extension are separate for each air quality standard. So you're right, for the 2006 air quality standard, the 35 microgram 24-hour standard, we've already had that extension request through a previous plan. So then for this annual standard of 12 micrograms, you have a whole separate process to be able to have a serious deadline and extension if needed. So they are all separated. They're not all interconnected.
So are you requesting a 5-year extension on this plan?
That's what would give us, yes, that's what would give us the 2030 attainment deadline, yes.
Okay, and so because of that extension, you would be going under a 5% annual reduction plan?
That would come after the 5-year extension. That's like the next step after you get an approval of an extension request would be the 5%.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
In terms of control measures that we would like to see included in this plan under the most stringent measures requirement that you have to follow, I would, point you both to, what several others have commented, including Genevieve and Perry. But I would also point you towards EPA's own comments. I know we've repeatedly put forward numerous control measures in front of you for years now, but EPA in their proposed FIP for contingency measures outlined a number of different measures that they analyzed. Most of, pretty much all of those they found not to be appropriate as contingency measures given the shortened timeline for implementing contingency measures. But in that technical support document on their proposed FIP, they went through and outlined a number of measures that they saw as being appropriate, and encouraged the Valley Air District to adopt as SIP measures, and especially to meet the most stringent measure requirements. So, just a handful of those that I'll point to, since they've already been discussed, would be strengthening the indirect source rule to be in line with the rule that South Coast has adopted. Your rules 4306 and 4320 for boiler, steam generators, and process heaters, EPA found to be less stringent than South Coast rules 1146 and 1109 for 4 categories of regulated units. Again, as others have pointed out, we believe that more can be done around agricultural equipment. As Genevieve said, it's the only mobile source that's not regulated, but also more can be done for low dust nut harvesters. I'll point to household wood burning. I'm glad to see that you guys are looking into this rule in ways that it could be strengthened. One request that we've been asking for a very long time is that you end all burning for anyone who has economical sources of heating beside wood burning. There's been numerous other jurisdictions, including the Tacoma area in Washington and Santa Rosa here in California, who have already outlawed all wood burning in non-EPA registered devices. That's feasible. It could be implemented tomorrow. EPA also said that you should be looking into extending your charbroil incentive measures beyond just the hotspot areas. In fact, I would suggest just getting rid of hotspots entirely and requiring all hotspot area rules to be adopted across the entire valley. And then, as others have mentioned, EPA also pointed to the electrification of gas and water heaters as being a measure that could be adopted here in San Joaquin Valley. And then lastly, I know something we've been pushing for a long time, and CARB has opened a rulemaking or a scientific advisory panel on for soil NOx and especially anthropogenic sources of soil NOx in the valley. We remain extremely concerned that this is a large source of NOx that is not being appropriately contributed to anthropogenic sources like fertilizer use and manure use. And we would like to see an analysis included in this FIP. The next FIP is too late. We could be looking at implementation of potential control measures well into the 2030s. On that SIP, we should be analyzing those controls now. We know that NOx from soil is a significant source. The question of how much of it is coming from anthropogenic sources is something that there is enough research and data to make an educated guess now that could later be refined after that panel has finished their review. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate the comments. Looks like our next commenter is Naomi Martinez. You'll be prompted to unmute.
Thank you. I think I will just probably say ditto to everything that Mark just said, reiterating the importance of thinking about the indirect source rule as one of those extra measures that the Air District should take so that we don't have to wait until 2029 for attainment. We owe that to the hundreds and thousands of children that continue to be diagnosed with asthma, or those that are dying early because we have this air pollution. I also want to say that it is time to stop allowing fireplace burning. Not long ago, to be exact, 2 weeks ago, when it was at 61 degrees, I saw a fireplace burning. I reported to your agency, and just to find out that because this house had a propane gas, they were exempted from the rule. There shouldn't be that kind of exemptions Fresno County cannot just give this blank, a pass to these residents. When there is not a need for heat, when it's 61 degrees. Two, when there are other methods of heating their homes. There's mini splits. There's so many other ways. So if we're serious about reaching attainment, we need to start closing these loopholes. Thank you.
Thank you, Naimeen. Thomas Spence, it looks like you are our next speaker. You should be prompted to unmute here in a moment.
Thank you. You can hear me now. I have a few questions on the direct PM25 emissions inventory. First of all, with residential wood burning, residential fuel use, combustion, I'm wondering what you have planned. I see on the emissions inventory the 5.5 tons per day during the winter. I see no diminution of that amount over time. Same, of course, in the annualized portion of that. So what specific measures with respect to residential fuel combustion are you proposing as an enhancement to Rule 4901?
Thanks for that question, Thomas. Just to clarify on the slide where we discuss residential wood burning, it mentions, and I'll just go into a little bit more detail, we're evaluating potentially extending the wood burning season. And then we're also evaluating additional incentive-based measures for the change out of fireplaces to cleaner alternatives such as natural gas inserts. But if you have any specific recommendations,
And
we would be
that's
happy
it,
to
and
hear
that's
those.
it. So what Mark Rose was proposing and pointed out that other localities have rules where they've completely zeroed it out. They've zeroed out those, thousands. I believe there's, over 5,000 of the old non-EPA certified wood stoves. I've got one next to me, and it's just horrendous living next to something like that. There's widespread cheating at night. People, under cover of darkness, are somehow able to get away with it. And it's, you really need to do, if you look at the guidance for fine particulate matter, the 2016 guidance for what you have to do when you're reclassified as serious non-attainment, it's all hands on board. EPA says you need to adopt every measure. What you are doing by ignoring measures like what Tacoma Pierce and Santa Rosa are doing, by ignoring those measures, it's tantamount to a de minimis exemption, and EPA specifically does not allow that. I realize your wood burning rules here are probably second to none in, overall stringency. But there are specific measures that other localities in California have adopted that you could adopt, and you're not even proposing to look at them. And as Mark, says, total curtailment of wood burning is something that you could do within 24 hours. You do that every day. You make that assessment for each county every day. You could adopt that. Why aren't you looking at that? Do you want to respond to that? Is there somebody in the board who's saying, no, I don't want to be seen as the heavy hand of government? Is that it? Or is it, is there some staff consideration? What is going on? It's a completely opaque process. It's completely inexplicable to me why you can't do that, why you can't at least look at that. I mean, it's 5.5 tons a day in the winter is, and with no end in sight. It's just unconscionable. I don't understand it. Do you care to respond to that?
Yeah, hi, Thomas. This is John Klassen. Just wanted to note that outside of the couple of elements that Emily mentioned about extending the burning season and continuing to operate our incentive program, yes, there's, of course, we're looking at other elements of other rules out there for residential wood burning, learning from that, what's being implemented, if that could be implemented here. So it is a more of a universal look at all the rules out there on this source category to see what could be brought in for this plan and for future planning for PM 2.5.
Yeah, because it's, it's certainly feasible. You make that assessment every night in every county. And it's free. It's, it's it costs you nothing. My sister is telling me in the background. Another thing is cooking. I have neighbors who are piling up big bonfires, and they've got a couple marshmallows on the end of a coat hanger, and that gives them an exemption that they can just, burn all these piles of wood from their old trees that are falling down, and they cut them up, and they're sitting around the campfire, and there's really, as far as I can see, nothing I can do about it. Now, South Coast, at least, albeit at a less stringent threshold, they don't allow solid fuel use during episodes of, high particulate matter. So I think their threshold is, it's pretty bad. It's 30 micrograms. But if you included cooking here with the present thresholds, I mean, it would have a huge impact. Certainly would for me. And I see other people around who are burning like that, and they have a grill standing by so that if somebody shows up, says, "What are you doing?" "Oh, well, we're preparing to cook." "Oh, yeah, where's your grill?" "There it is." So it's absurd that cooking isn't included in the in the curtailment, in the residential curtailments. And then, again, with cooking, with the restaurant cooking, I mean, that's a category of emissions that's continuing to rise. And so it's, it seems like we should at least stop digging ourselves in. You have the technology is there, the Habit restaurant in Clovis compared to the Habit restaurant out near Whole Foods in Fig Garden. I mean, it's it's night and day. I mean, that Habit restaurant near Whole Foods, it frequently just completely inundates the parking lot there with smoke. And there is control technology available. Might be expensive for them to retrofit, but I'm in southeast Fresno, and in south central Fresno, within the the 617 area of South Fresno, there's a new wood burning barbecue restaurant that's going in. I noticed in the Fresno Bee a couple months ago. And I don't see why you're allowing new restaurants to come in there and use solid fuel to cook with. It's absurd. But what Nyman Martinez mentioned just now about the propane users, I have several neighbors, new homes that are being built here in the neighborhood where they have propane tanks, and they've elected not to, even though they're served by natural gas. The natural gas lines run right past these, the lots. They have elected to go with propane instead of natural gas. And so I assume that exempts them then, and they're allowed to use their fireplaces. And I even have somebody down the street, an existing home that was built 75 years ago, and they switched to propane. They put in a big propane tank out in front. And so now their existing fireplaces under the current rules, they're allowed to use them with impunity, even though they have natural gas available. And that's another absurdity. I mean, in my own situation, I took advantage of the district's incentive and I put in heat pumps, and they worked very well. And I'm glad for that program and everything. And in exchange, blocked up the fireplace, which I haven't used in 40 years and have no intention of ever using, but nobody else who lives here will ever be able to use the fireplace, and that's a good thing. So I think it's a good program, but probably I'm the wrong person to be lavishing funds on. And then I'm cognizant of the fact that, I have a little wood burning stove out in my workshop that now I'm allowed to, because I don't have any other source of heat from natural gas. Now I guess I'm allowed to use that wood burning device, that ancient wood burning device that pollutes like all get out. And and I can do that with impunity. So you need to think about some of the ramifications of, what you're doing. Propane needs to be included in, as a heating source, that doesn't exempt you from the wood burning rules. Heat pumps shouldn't exempt people like me from the wood burning rules. It's, have you thought about any of those ramifications? Have you thought about amending Rule 4901 along those lines? Anyone would care to respond at this moment?
Yeah, thanks, Thomas, for all those comments and recommendations and suggestions. I know you had a lot of comments there about the rule, the enforcement of it, the different aspects and provisions. So I would encourage you, if you could reach out, or we'll reach out to you and someone from our enforcement team to help walk you through all the details of the rule and how we enforce it and all the different elements. Maybe that can help provide you some clarification on a lot of the questions that you had.
I think I'm pretty well up on exactly what enforcement does, because I contact them quite a few times of the year, and in a normal enforcement year, I've turned in hundreds of my neighbors, hundreds of them, over 100 have been cited. But more than a dozen have been, because they found out that the wood burning rule is enforced at least during the day, or in the, not at night, but in the day, if you catch them, then, they've seen the wisdom of converting over to a gas unit on their old fireplace. But, so that's something, but, it's, most people realize that they can get away with it. You look at the emissions in South Fresno, at night, just over the last bad episode week, and it's, the emissions in the evening, like at 5, 6 o'clock, they start to rise, and they usually peak by midnight or 1 a.m. sometimes. Well, what is it that's happening in the middle of the night? Are there more trucks passing through the neighborhood? What could it be? Well, I happen to think that it's residential wood burning, because they know they can get away with it. It's, I don't think it's generators are kicking in, or, it's residential wood burning. It's obvious. You can smell it in the air. It's something more needs to be done about it. You really need to be, this way of saying, that, well, overall, our rule is the most stringent, is, it's just I think it's cheating. You're cheating on the MSMs.
Thomas, I think we do have another commenter. Just wanted to leave time for them as well, and for others listening to the workshop. So thank you for all your comments, and please reach out if you have some more suggestions.
Cynthia, looks like you are next up. Thank you for your patience. You'll be prompted to unmute.
Hello, Cynthia Pinto Cabrera here with the Central Valley Air Quality Coalition. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Yeah, so thanks for the workshop today and answering a lot of the questions that we have. I think I have a follow-up question on what Mark was kind of talking about on the extension. Has that extension already been approved? Are you all in the process, or are we under the assumption that it's going to get approved because we've gotten extensions in the past? Just kind of interested in where that process is at. And I urge you all to be as, you know, transparent as possible to community members and, you know, everybody, all stakeholders involved, that if there is going to be a extension. And secondly, I'd like to ask if there's any written version of all that rule analysis that you all did earlier in the presentation, where you listed a handful of rules and regulations that you all looked for and only highlighted a couple that there's opportunities. Because CBAC, Earth Justice, Leadership Council, everybody on here has done some extensive review of the rules and regulations. And I think we have and made those recommendations. So I'd just like to, you know, double check what process you all went through the rules when reviewing the rules that you all put up on those slides, because we've again submitted multiple comments on some of the issues with like loopholes and where instances where folks can pay a fee instead of complying. So just wanting to see what that looked like in writing, if you all have that, if you could point me in the right direction for that. And lastly, just wanted to echo a lot of the comments on regulating, you know, ammonia, residential wood burning, all of those things that just been listed. I'm sure you all have taken extensive notes on all the recommendations that we made, but wanted to make sure you all knew that CVAC was also in support of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia, for those comments and questions. Just to answer a couple of them, the extension request is requested as part of the attainment plan. So Carb could probably speak a little bit more to this, but it is a demonstration that we are unable to attain by the original 2025 attainment dates, but it will be requested through this plan. And then as far as our control measure evaluation, it is still ongoing. Our process is we look at any available new source performance standards, any other federal guidelines, state guidelines. We compare to other regions. So those areas highlighted are specific areas where we see there might be some opportunities, but the purpose of this workshop is to hear from the public as well. So we appreciate those opportunities that you're all highlighting. I did take extensive notes. I have about 3 pages of notes. So it is all being noted down. So appreciate the questions. I think those were your main questions. So again, appreciate your comments.
Great, thank you. Can we get a notification whenever, you know, all of those resources are out? I think we were a little disappointed that yesterday we couldn't see, you know, what the presentation was going to be like, to, you know, better prepare comments and questions and have time to look at the slides. So, you know, anybody who registered for this, could we get like a notification when those materials become available as soon as possible? Thank you.
Yes, yeah. When we post the draft plan for public review, we will make sure to send out a public notice. And the workshop presentation was posted yesterday. So I apologize that you weren't able to access that on our website, but it is posted now. So if you have any additional follow-up questions, feel free to reach out. It looks like we do have one additional commenter, John Sanders. You should be prompted to unmute here shortly.
Okay. This is John Sanders again. I'm in Bakersfield, California. I did want to follow up with some of the things people said following my speech. Here goes. I would like to thank the folks who monitor the wells in Kern County. Their findings of the inspectors have kept people, all our crews safe, the public safe from the PM attributed ailments. And as far as continuing the fireplace ban, Kern County Valley Air has provided so many helpful grants to replace and disable. The neighborhoods have much cleaner air. To follow up regarding oil well VOCs, etc. Again, Kern County produces the cleanest oil in the world. Furthermore, the oil producers in Kern County have adopted all energy resources, renewable and non-renewable. Renewable is the way of the future, and the oil and gas operators are leading the charge in Kern County. Again, I want to thank the Air Board for what they've done. They've helped a lot of people. And as I said earlier, we just have to, time these things better. And I want to thank them for what they've done with air purifiers and fireplaces. You guys do a great job, but we do have some stuff to be better at. And for the people who say oil's bad, well, they need to park their cars and not drive anymore, because everything in that car is made of oil. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your comments. It looks like we have one last commenter, Ruben Rodriguez. You should be prompted to unmute here shortly.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. This is Ruben Rodriguez with Central California Environmental Justice Network. I wanted to end it, and I wasn't going to raise my hand, but I just wanted to end it with some reality, And the reality of the fact is people are suffering. The climate is changing. We need stronger rules. We need a just transition. We need individuals in your guys' positions that are going to be serious about their job. That's the reality of it. We're not here to try to sugarcoat things or to try to make it seem as if, we're trying. Yes, we are trying, but we need to try harder. There needs to be more things done, and there can be more things done. The reality of it is that people are, as people say, sleeping in bed with other folks, right? Corporations intertwined with other corporations. And who loses at the end of the day? My comrades share a lot of beautiful and important points. And there's still a lot of conversation and dialogue that needs to happen. But again, the reality of the fact that let's not play ourselves. The production of oil is causing issues, right? We need folks to be a little bit more passionate about the work that they're doing, especially those folks in those positions. That is the reality of it. People are not only, there's a saying that says the rich are getting rich and the poor are getting poor. And I think I've repeated this a few times, but the poor are not only getting poor, we're also getting sick. A lot of us are dying, as a result of the greed. And we can change this. That's the reality. We can change it. We just need to figure out how to work together to make this reality happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben, for those comments. Looks like that was our last commenter. Just wanted to thank everyone again for being here and for all of the suggestions that have been brought up. So at this time, we'll go ahead and conclude the workshop. And again, thank you for joining us.